Aha. Mine says recording in progress, so is that okay? Okie dokie. Well, hello everybody. Good to see you all again. Those of you I can see, because those of you who know, my computer hates me, so I can only see certain things at any particular time. But it's wonderful for all of you who have tuned in. Thank you very much. I'm talking today on a subject that I actually gave a conference paper on at the Thomas Hardy Society Festival back in July. For this, what I did was I went back to my master's because I got sick of people telling me I'm a one or two trick pony, and that apparently I only talk about masculinity or about the Gothic or both together. So I decided to go back to my master's dissertation, which I got a merit for. So it's all right. But I do need to warn you all, and this is from years ago, I've updated it a little bit, but I do need to warn you all, be patient. It's a bit melon twisting, as you can imagine, something from me would be. So be patient, bear with, it does come together in the end. So hopefully you won't all die of boredom while I'm speaking. So, Fallen Wessex Hardy's subversion of Milton's Paradise Lost. So what we're going to do is start with a couple of quotes. She says, excellent. But the tree whose operation brings knowledge of good and ill, which I have set the pledge of thy obedience and thy faith, amid the garden by the tree of life. Remember what I warn thee, shun to taste, and shun the bitter consequence, for know, the day thou eatest thereof, my sole command transgressed, inevitably thou shalt die. Lovely Paradise Lost. There we go. Next quote. I have felt that the doll of fiction must be demolished if England is to have a school of fiction at all. The development of a more virile type of novel is not incompatible with sound morality. Hardy, 1891. And the last quote to start us off with, the redoubtable Margaret Oliphant. To demonstrate that a woman, twice fallen from the woman's code of honor and purity, was by that fact proved to be specially and aggressively pure, was a task for Hercules, and Mr. Hardy has no more succeeded in doing this than others have done before him. Ouch. There's Margaret Oliphant for you. So, John Milton's Paradise Lost has become a central monument in British literary history. For Thomas Addison and other great men of letters, the poem was universal in its scope and useful for teaching what he called the great moral of obedience. The seminal text declares, and next to life, our death, the tree of knowledge, grew fast. Knowledge of good bought dear by knowing ill. That's book 4. Such knowledge for Victorian society was concomitant with carnal knowledge. We are all very well informed as to the ego of woman, as to its disabilities, whether moral, intellectual, physical, or political. Give her the apple and see what comes of it, a writer for the Westminster Review proclaimed in 1889. The Milton scholar Jeanie Grant Moore notes that by Milton's time, the negative view of Eve had extended to all women who were considered corrupt simply because they were her descendants. She goes on to say that not only was the fallen Eve seen as the incarnation of evil, but the prelapsarian Eve was also as infected due to inherent moral weakness present in all women. This is the kind of thing from as early as Shakespeare that has been addressed. basically Lady Macbeth kicked ass, but there you go. Shannon Miller is a Milton scholar who argues that the woman question, as it came to be called in the 19th century, was actually not embarked upon in the 19th century, but in the 17th century, with the publication of Milton's Eve. And she claims that Milton represents the convention of silencing Eve, at least within male-authored texts in the anti-feminist tradition, because it was Eve who had seduced Adam to fall, naughty Eve. This ethos is central to Victorian societal conventions. Tracts written by the minister John Angel, that's his real name, John Angel James, during the 1860s are typical of the gender norms of the time. Here we go. To be a good wife is the high attainment in female excellence. It is a woman's brightest glory since the fall. And let's not get started on John Ruskin's pontifications in Sesame and Lilies. And yet he gave his wife away to a pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood painter. The point is that the influence of Paradise Lost had become so familiar to the Victorians that it remained permanently in the background, hidden in plain sight, shaping the ideology of separate spheres. In Michael Milgate's collation of Hardy's Maxgate Library, we can see listed Paradise Lost, as originally published by John Milton, being a facsimile reproduction of the first edition. Introduction by David Masson, London Elliot Stock 1877, red bookplate, DH signature, lightly annotated. In Candour in English Fiction in 1890, Hardy wrote of Milton that he handles his puppets, the Christian divinities and fiends, quite as freely as the pagan divinities were handled by the Greek and Latin imaginative authors. In a letter to Edward Clodd of 1908, Hardy observed that Paradise Lost proves nothing. For Hardy, Milton's great epic was ripe for subversion. He shows his contempt for the religious and moral practices of his contemporaries in the article mentioned above. Here we go. An arbitrary proclamation has gone forth that certain picked commandments of the 10 shall be preserved intact, to wit, the 1st, 3rd, and 7th, that the 9th shall be infringed but gingerly, the 6th only as much as necessary, and the remainder alone as much as you please, in a genteel manner. While Hardy's contemporaries portrayed Eve in various ways, most notably the fallen woman featured in paintings such as Found Drowned by G.F. Watts, Hardy's own representations of Eve were rather different. Now, I've brought up this slide because this is what I use every time I teach my Victorians to schools. The reason is this is a fallen woman. She's committed suicide. She's thrown herself off London Bridge. She has just been pulled out of the water. G.F. Watts was a symbolist. Note 2 particular symbols in this painting. 1, the star.
Yes.
2, the position of the lady's arms. Who else is pictured with their arms out like this? Jesus Christ. So what Watts is saying is, this fallen woman is not at fault at all. She has died for the sins of others, just as Christ did. And here is the guiding star of heaven to light her home accordingly. So that was just a brief aside there. Sorry about that. The novel I will be discussing today features not just one Eve figure, but 2 Eves for each Adam figure. This is where it gets confusing, bear with. The Eve who tempts Adam and the Eve who is punished for it. They are not the same person. A further subversion of Paradise Lost is that these Adam and Eve figures are not gender specific. Thus, Eve may be represented by a male character and Adam as a female character. This, in my dissertation from a master's a million years ago, is what I called the Eve complex. And through it, I showed how Hardy was able to interrogate the accepted conventions of gender and morality, which were responsible for the deeply ingrained ethos of Milton's Eve as a figure of aberrant femininity chastised. So a number of scholars have linked Milton's works to Hardy's novels in one form or another, usually to Tess of the D'Urbervilles, but have any demonstrated instances of Hardy actually subverting Milton's Adam and Eve, rather than simply utilising the figures? Edward Neal's violety bluey blackish, thinking about Tess and identity politics, reads Angel and Tess as embodying new versions of Adam and Eve, with Talbot Hayes Dairy figuring as their Eden, as it would. Jodie Gallagher Ross builds on this in her article, The Irrecoverable Past in Tess of the D'Urbervilles, in which she goes on to identify Alec with Satan, totes obs, quoting his speech to Tess, "You are Eve, and I am the old other one, come to tempt you in the disguise of an inferior animal." James Heffernan claims that Milton's Eve is a prototype of Tess and describes Alec as Satan laughing diabolically with pitchfork in hand by the firelight in his essay Cruel Persuasions, Seduction, Temptation and Agency in Tess. The 3 novels I looked at in my master's were Far from the Madding Crowd, The Woodlanders and Jude the Obscure. The Eve complexes contained within these novels work completely independently of each other, again, bear with, so that a particular character may be labelled as an Adam while, here we go, simultaneously presenting as an Eve figure in a different complex, each instance with a different complex occurring. Melon twisted, but bear with. Each Eve complex demonstrates Hardy's destabilizing of Milton. For Hardy utilizes Eve, Adam, and Satan to subvert the Edenic myth, erasing the sexual guilt and shame attached to Milton's Eve. So today, I will only have time to focus on one, so you'll all breathe a sigh of relief, and that one is dun dun dun. And let's just take a minute to look at this, shall we? Yeah, I think I'll leave this here for a bit, don't you? Woof. Far from the Madding Crowd, The Devil in Scarlet and Brass. According to Claire Tomerlin, this novel is the warmest and sunniest in Hardy's oeuvre. She sees it as a near perfect mid-Victorian romance. This is an interesting view when we take into consideration that the plot devices of Boldwood's insanity, Fanny Robin's illegitimate pregnancy, her subsequent death in childbirth in the Casterbridge workhouse, and the murder of Sergeant Troy. Far from the Madding Crowd is one of Hardy's finest pastoral tales, but one in which the normal conventions of a rural idyll are given a darkly ironic twist. It doesn't sound very happy in summary to me. It is the first of Hardy's novels to which I apply the Eve complex. In fact, it contains 2 separate complexes working independently of each other, and hopefully I will be able to explain accordingly. The first involves the trio of Bathsheba Everdeen, Sergeant Troy, and Fanny Robin. The second separate Eve complex is Troy, Bathsheba, and William Boldwood. Hardy does not simply undermine Milton's Eve, but also Milton's Adam and his Satan, though Satan continues to get all the best lines, obviously. In one complex, we see Bathsheba as tempted Eve to Troy's Adam, but she is not punished for her sin, for at the novel's conclusion, she is embarking upon married life with the stoically loyal and dependable Gabriel Oak. It is the tragic figure of Fanny Robin who is the punished Eve, dying destitute and alone, with even the dog who had tried to help her being stoned away. In parallel with this is Sergeant Troy playing the tempter Eve to Bathsheba's Adam, and the tragic William Boldwood playing the punished Eve, left insane and imprisoned for the rest of his life. Neither Fanny nor Boldwood deserve their fates, and herein lies the root of Hardy's challenge to Milton. In Hardy's vision, the sinner is triumphant. Adam is not necessarily corrupted by Eve's temptation, and it is the innocent who are punished. And anyone who knows me knows that I will defend poor Boldwood to my last breath, so don't diss my Boldwood. The influence of Paradise Lost is so pervasive that many readers perceive only the stereotypical Miltonic allusions in Hardy's work. Philip Allingham designates Boldwood as Adam, Bathsheba as Eve, and Troy as Satan, while Gabriel Oak guards Bathsheba's farm as the angelic warden. He guards God's throne. While Troy does indeed play the Satan figure of the story, this novel is far more nuanced than at first perceived. Ian Ousby once described this novel as an exercise in misogyny. The misogynistic laws Hardy invokes are blatantly unsatisfactory, mere fragments of male prejudice dressed up in the language of impersonal wisdom. Just wondering if he read the same novel I did. He believes that Hardy is deliberately and determinedly invoking the misogynistic interpretation of woman's role in the fall. Indeed. Hardy invoked in order to subvert. And far from being a misogynist, Hardy was, if anything, a proto-feminist. The novel's fallen woman is Fanny Robin, but Hardy delineates her as cherubic, with a golden halo of hair. In Milton, a man's crime makes guilty all his sons, Book 3. While Fanny is a punished Eve, she is also defended by Hardy. He takes up Adam's cry in Paradise Lost. Ah, why should all mankind, for one man's fault, thus guiltless be condemned, if guiltless? That's from Book 10. Excuse me. In death, Fanny and her baby are silent ones, from whom all associations of a repulsive kind have been removed. Fanny has been endowed with an innocent white countenance. Hardy ironically has Bathsheba, the tempter Eve, ordered Joseph Poorgrass to array particular flowers upon Fanny's coffin when he goes to collect it from Casterbridge. Laurestinus, whose fruit is inconspicuous, which is an explicit reference to Fanny's illegitimate pregnancy. Boy's love, otherwise known as maid's ruin, and chrysanthemums, which symbolize the sun and thus regeneration. There are a number of direct Miltonic references within Far From the Madding Crowd. Boldwood, when initially recognizing Bathsheba in the corn market, treads for the first time the threshold of the injured lover's hell. Straight from Paradise Lost. This is actually Milton's metaphor for jealousy in Book 5. When Bathsheba's flock are bloated and poisoned by clover, Hardy quotes from Milton's Lycidas, apologies for my pronunciation, of 1637. Swoln with wind and the rank mist they drew. Then when Bathsheba and Boldwood meet again after her marriage to Troy, Boldwood's agonized, "Would to God you had never taken me up, since it was only to throw me down," echoes God's casting of Satan down through chaos and into hell. Hardy uses the figure of Satan independently of his Adams and Eves, which is again an unsettling of Paradise Lost. Satan does not tempt Eve in this novel. Eve tempts Adam, while the innocent counterpart of the tempter Eve is punished. In Far From the Madding Crowd, the devil cuts a dashing figure in scarlet and brass, and let's just take a moment to look at him again, shall we? Like Milton's Satan, Troy emerges from the darkness into chaos with a capital C, when he and Bathsheba become entangled in the fir plantation. Akin to the devil, Troy is the king of liars. He was moderately truthful towards men, but to women lied like a cretin. He is unashamedly false. He spoke fluently and unceasingly, as does his glozing Miltonic counterpart. He could in this way be one thing and seem another. For instance, he could speak of love and think of dinner, call on the husband to look at the wife, be eager to pay and intend to owe. When Troy smiles, the devil smiled from a loophole in top. The luminous streams of Troy's sword exercises in the hollow amid the ferns creates a Luciferian light, outlining him in an aurora militaris. Boldwood actually accuses Troy of being the devil, to whom Bathsheba had sold soul and body. In a masterful study of Hardy's oeuvre, J.O. Bailey classes Troy as one of Hardy's many Mephistophelian visitants. Characters who are outsiders, are generally adorned in red, and disrupt entire communities. We only have to think of Diggory then in The Return of the Native. One of Hardy's diary entries for 1890, under the banner of Reflections on Art, notes that high art may choose to depict evil as well as good without losing its quality. Its choice of evil, however, must be limited by the sense of worthiness. Troy is one of Hardy's earliest and best Satans. And of course, we've had Terence, now we have Julie. Bathsheba is directly referred to as Eve when Boldwood first espies her after the notorious Valentine incident. Adam had awakened from his deep sleep, and behold, there was Eve. Later, Troy curses Bathsheba for tempting him with that face of yours and those cursed coquetries. He blames her for Fanny's death, declaring that it may have been prevented if he'd never met Bathsheba. Strokes beard. I should have married her. I never had another thought till you came in my way. Indeed. Of course, this is an example of one of Troy's many self-delusional moments, It was he who had refused to marry Fanny when she arrived at the wrong church for the ceremony. Yet Bathsheba is believed by all to be such a shapely maid, and it is she who is victorious. It is Bathsheba who becomes Troy's wife, her temptation of him inadvertently leading to Fanny's punishment. Tomlin writes of Bathsheba that she feels herself entitled by her beauty, her position, and her character to assert her own will in most matters. Milton's Eve also feels entitled to assert her own will, though she remains submiss to Adam. With thy permission then, and thus forewarned, the willinger I go. That's from book 11. Unlike Milton's meek Eve, Bathsheba believes that it is difficult for a woman to define her feelings in language because it is chiefly made by men to express theirs. However, she is quick to admonish her workers. Now, mind, you have a mistress instead of a master. Don't any among you suppose that because I am a woman, I don't understand the difference between bad goings on and good. I shall astonish you all. The comparison between Bathsheba and Eve is implicit throughout the novel. Eve's name is even suggested in Bathsheba's surname, Everdeen. Eve is created from Adam's rib and then looks adoringly at her reflection in a pool. Bathsheba studies herself in a mirror, smiling, the first time we and Oak, the Archangel Gabriel, see her. Poor diminutive Fanny Robin, the punished Eve of this complex. She is a kindred spirit of Milton's pre-lapsarian Eve. Milton's Eve is described as dishevelled, which implied subjection, yielded with coy submission, modest pride, and sweet, reluctant, amorous delay. Book 4. This corresponds with Fanny's first appearance. A slim girl, rather thinly clad, though it is winter, who is startled by Oak's sudden appearance in the wood into assuming a careless position. She is ingenuous, exhibiting an unconscious desire to show unconcern. Fanny's wrist beats with a throb of tragic intensity, and Oak senses in her figure and stature too little of vitality. Both Milton's pre-lapsarian Eve and Fanny are shown as submissive, coy participants in the sexual act. Far from being a tempter, we learn that Fanny had been coerced by the promise of marriage to Troy. You said lots of times you would marry me, and I don't cry now. It is foolish. If I said so, of course I will. Strokes beard again. The marriage fails to take place when Fanny accidentally arrives at the wrong church. When she does find Troy, he accuses her of being a fool, and turning from her, walked rapidly away. Troy's next appearance in the novel is the fateful meeting with Bathsheba in the fir plantation, and so begins Fanny's punishment. Fanny now progresses from a farm girl to a homeless wanderer to death in the workhouse. In Paradise Lost, Adam is the goodliest man of men in Book 4. Sergeant Troy, however, is the illegitimate son of a lord and a French governess. He is immoral, egotistical, philandering, a liar, yet suave and charming nonetheless. Liddy blushes when asked to describe him. A gay man a walking ruin to honest girls, and some people say. He is tempted by Bathsheba as Milton's Adam was by his Eve. And like Milton's Adam, he rues his decision. In Paradise Lost, Adam is shaken with high passions, anger, hate, mistrust, suspicion, discord. Book 9. When confronted with the corpses of Fanny and her baby, Troy is transformed into that post-lapsarian Adam. He looks on Bathsheba with a silencing, imperious gaze before pushing her away, refusing to kiss her. Troy castigates Bathsheba before declaring heartlessly, "You are nothing to me, nothing. A ceremony before a priest doesn't make a marriage. I am not morally yours." This statement alone would have been enough to shock Victorian readers. However, it is by portraying Troy as Satan and Adam and a tempter Eve that makes this character truly subversive and unique. Just going to put my lamp on, getting a bit dark to read. In the second Eve complex of this novel, hopefully the first wasn't too horribly convoluted, Troy as tempter Eve is a tour de force. On my experience, Adam, freely taste. Paradise Lost, Book 9. These velvet words of Milton's post-lapsarian Eve are a precursor of Troy's own verbal dexterity. Troy's linguistic and physical adroitness, coupled with his sexual aggressiveness, make him an almost irresistible emblem of male power. He tempts Bathsheba into marriage by claiming, "He had that day seen a woman more beautiful than I, and that his constancy could not be counted on unless I became his at once." Indeed, this emblem of male power is in fact a tempter Eve, and the coup de grace is his sword exercise in the Hollow Amid the Ferns chapter. Although there is no direct reference to any physical contact beyond a kiss, Hardy's account of Troy's strange and glorious performance is one of the most sexually charged and sexually provocative scenes in 19th century fiction. This chapter is a description of phallic aggression, both marvelously vivid and acutely aware of the subjective impressions on a woman's mind of a substitute sexual experience. Quite frankly, I was left quite hot and bothered by the first time I read this chapter. I've since read it a number of times, not saying anything. In less than 5 pages, Hardy creates the most memorable chapter of the entire novel. It is erotically charged from the title onwards, The Hollow Amid the Ferns. I'll just leave that with you. The evening sun is a bristling ball of gold, going to use my Miranda voice now, that sweeps the tips of the ferns with its long, luxuriant rays. Even the moss and grass carpeting the floor are yielding. Troy declares that he will let Bathsheba see some loose play, which he promises will be promiscuous and unfettered. He provocatively ascertains whether Bathsheba has pluck enough to let me do what I wish by flourishing his sword about her. When Bathsheba is taken aback, Troy admonishes her, telling her that if she is afraid, then he can't perform. At the end of said performance, Troy confidently claims that his sword never errs. The aurora militaris created by his swordplay recalls Milton's post-Lapsarian Eve, whose eye darted contagious fire to Adam and wantonly repays the lascivious eyes Adam casts on her. They both burn in lust. Book 9. By the end of Troy's temptation, Bathsheba is left with the blood beating in her face. She is stinging as if aflame to the very hollows of her feet. Indeed, Bathsheba, as Adam, is left feeling like one who has sinned a great sin. Bathsheba has been captured by Troy's tempter Eve. Quite frankly, after that sword play, who wouldn't be? Bathsheba had been literally ensnared by Troy at their first meeting, when his spur became entangled with the tasseled trim of her dress. Amongst the ferns, she becomes morally and sexually ensnared. From this point on, Bathsheba's will weakens considerably. As Adam, she now loved Troy in the way that only self-reliant women love when they abandon self-reliance. Troy's power over Bathsheba seems almost exclusively sexual and rhetorical. Milton's Adam questions the post-Lapsarian Eve. How can I live without thee? How forego thy sweet converse? Book 9. Bathsheba, too, has fixed her lot from Book 9 with her tempter Eve in this second complex. She knows that she is certain to undergo like doom. If death consort with thee, death is to me as life. Again, Book 9. Bathsheba, however, is not ultimately punished for her or Troy's sin. Boldwood is. And here's my man. And I have to say, I prefer Michael Sheen. I know that is sacrilege, but there we are. To Boldwood, women had been remote phenomena rather than necessary complements. Like Fanny Robin in the first Eve complex, William Boldwood is an innocent who is tragically punished for his link to Adam, in this case, Bathsheba. Where Hardy defends his fallen woman, Fanny, he uses Boldwood as a vehicle through which he dismantles another stereotype, that of the Victorian patriarch. Boldwood's transformation is the most violent and significant of all, because through it, Hardy makes clear that the illusory nature of the male's apparent security and stability in Victorian society is just that, an illusion. Boldwood's stillness, which struck casual observers more than anything else in his character and habit, hides enormous antagonistic forces. If ever his equilibrium is disturbed, he is in extremity at once. My most favorite line from any novel ever. Boldwood is already a recluse before his life is destroyed by Sergeant Troy. His farm is his almonry and cloister in one. After receiving the infamous Valentine, Bathsheba, Boldwood is awakened from his deep sleep. Now he is living outside his defences for the first time and with a fearful sense of exposure. Boldwood is innocent, yet he is a punished Eve. His equilibrium is not only disturbed, it is destroyed at the novel's conclusion. Through Boldwood, Hardy is able to be doubly subversive, punishing the innocent while simultaneously challenging Victorian notions of what it meant to be a man. After Troy's triumphant entry into the novel via the Fir Plantation, we are told it was a fatal omission of Boldwood's that he had never once told Bathsheba she was beautiful. Boldwood is as Milton's pre-lapsarian Eve, much deceived, much failing, hapless. Book 9. Troy's entrance into the novel signals the beginning of Boldwood's punishment. But even though Boldwood becomes somewhat of an automaton, he is not so repulsed that he does not proceed in his plaint, renewing his hope of an engagement with Bathsheba upon Troy's disappearance. Forsake me not thus, Adam. Book 10. At Boldwood's Christmas party, he tries to force a ring on Bathsheba's finger. You wouldn't let a dog suffer what I have suffered. Give up a little to me when I would give up my life for you. In chapter 34, Home Again, a Trickster, the frantic Boldwood tries to bribe Troy into marrying first Fanny and then Bathsheba before the sergeant crowingly reveals he is already married to Bathsheba. The two Eves of this second complex now confront each other, and we witness Troy delivering Boldwood's punishment. "'Twould be a mistake to kill me, would it not?" "'Twould be a mistake to kill you," repeated Boldwood mechanically with a bowed head. "Better to kill yourself." "Far better." "I'm glad you see it." You can also see him clapping him on the back and saying, "Chap, what ho!" Boldwood, of course, doesn't die, but we witness the slow erosion of his sanity, culminating in his shooting of Troy at the Christmas party, spoilers, sorry, and then trying to shoot himself. Boldwood's face gnashes in despair. His veins had swollen and a frenzied look gleamed in his eyes. But when the loyal Samway prevents Boldwood's suicide, the punished Eve declares, "Well, it makes no difference. There is another way for me to die." The farmer then hands himself in to the police, expecting the death sentence. However, unequivocal symptoms of Boldwood's mental derangement, as it is called in the novel, are discovered. Somewhat pathetic evidences of a mind crazed with care and love. Death is commuted to life imprisonment. The farmer, supposedly composed of bold wood, is in fact destabilized and is then punished for sins committed by another, Sergeant Troy as Tempter Eve. When we compare the Adam figure of each of these two complexes in this novel, we can see that unlike Milton's Adam, Hardy's Adams are not necessarily corrupted by their Tempter Eves. Sergeant Troy as Adam is certainly not corrupted by Bathsheba as Tempter Eve, although he blames her for Fanny's death. How can a character that can simultaneously play Adam, Tempter Eve, and Satan possibly become any more corrupted than his original nature has already contrived? Before he meets Bathsheba, he has already seduced and abandoned poor Fanny Robin, and Liddy has already blushingly described him as a walking ruin to honest girls. as Troy says to Boldwood, "Perhaps I am a bad man, the victim of my impulses, led away to do what I ought to leave undone." On the other hand, we can see that Bathsheba as Adam is corrupted by her tempter Eve. Where Bathsheba begins the novel, willful and independent, after succumbing to Troy and marrying him, she noticeably weakens in character. In a matter of months, her voice had become sad, painfully lowered from the fullness and vivacity of the previous summer. She now implores her husband with an agonized look. Troy already laments the loss of all the pluck and sauciness Bathsheba had once displayed. "Upon my life, if I had known what a chicken-hearted creature you were under all your boldness." There's the word again, bold. In fact, Bathsheba as Adam ends up fleeing her tempter Eve to spend the night in a species of swamp dotted with fungi, not terribly Edenic sounding. When she returns to her house, she barricades herself into the disused attic. Bathsheba's spirit is broken by Troy as tempter Eve. She becomes as Milton's post-lapsarian Adam. There we go. "Our state cannot be severed. We are one flesh. To lose thee were to lose myself." Book 9. Troy's Adam, however, remains defiant until his last breath. His state is not inseparably linked to anyone's. So in conclusion, Far from the Madding Crowd is a tale which utilizes not one, but two Eve complexes, interrogating and challenging Victorian gender stereotypes. The novel subverts an epic which had become so pervasive within 19th century society that it cemented the framework of separate spheres and fomented the image of the fallen woman. In Hardy's reading, Paradise Lost is not an incontrovertible pillar of morality, but an epic to be challenged, expanded upon, reviewed, and reworked. That's the end of the lesson. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. That was excellent.
Go to gallery.
Thank you, Tracy.
Go to gallery.
Yeah, I've got that.
Oh, I can see people. Hello.
Thank you very much, Tracy.